What is up, folks? How's it going? This is Watch from MW Technology, and I'm sitting in my 2023 Model Y. We've had this car for now a year and a half. It was made in China and shipped here to Vancouver, BC, Canada. Now, the Model Y is now the most sold car in the world. It sold over 1.15 million last year in 2023, beating out the mighty Toyota Corolla as well as the RAV4. Which is kind of insane if you think about it. This is an all-electric SUV from a company that's less than 20 years old. Now, both the Model 3 and Y have completely taken over places like here in Vancouver, where the government has heavily incentivized the adoption of battery electric vehicles. And to the layperson or somebody outside, you might be wondering, why the heck is everybody and their grandmothers driving a Tesla, and especially the Model Y? Well, in this long-term review, I'm going to talk about why the Model Y particularly has taken off, as well as talk about its shortcomings that I've experienced throughout my ownership period. Furthermore, I'm going to ultimately determine whether it was worth getting this thing and whether the crippling depreciation pitfalls of battery electric vehicles in general was worth it, and if I'm going to go back to a gas or hybrid vehicle. Now, this Model Y comes from the Shanghai factory, and it's built incredibly well, until 10,000 kilometers where the tailgate started to rattle. After scheduling a service appointment, which you can do so really easily through the app, they changed out the bump stop settings as well as lubricated the rear tailgate seals, and that mitigated the problem quite nicely. They also changed out the front speaker grille on the dashboard, which I didn't even think anything was wrong with. This car comes with a 5-year, 80,000 kilometer warranty, and my overall experience with the service throughout all the different Tesla vehicles that I've owned has been pretty good. Now, this car is pretty much brand new from a condition standpoint, but the black paint on the exterior has started to show some micro scratches, and the clear coat that Tesla uses is quite thin. And overall, the paint quality is something that Tesla still struggles with. I had a blue Model 3 that was only 2 years old, but the paint looked like it was 10 years old. Furthermore, if you do a lot of highway driving, the front of the car is very vulnerable to rock chips, and it can actually chip the paint quite easily. So I'd recommend some sort of front PPF kit. And if I wanted to, I could probably get rid of the micro scratches with some buffing or using some sort of ceramic coat, but it is a nuisance to deal with. Now, moving forward, let's talk about range, which is probably the number one concern for non-EV drivers. And range has to do with many different things, but we're going to boil it down to 3 different aspects. One is battery size, chemistry, as well as the overall efficiency of the car. Now, just to get some terminology out of the way, when we refer to kilowatt hours, that means total energy spent in a given amount of time. And when it comes to just kilowatts, that means the actual actively used energy, either discharge or recharging the battery. So batteries are always rated in kilowatt hours. This has a 60 kilowatt hour battery, and you don't actually get access to the full 60 kilowatts. There's a little bit of a bottom and top buffer, anywhere between 2 to 5 kilowatts, just for a safety net. So if you're on the road and you get to 0%, you still have a few kilometers to get to a charger just for your safety sense, which is always a nice thing. So I measured about 56 usable kilowatt hour capacity with this car on a day-to-day basis from 0 to 100%. Now, the lifetime efficiency of this car is about 160 watt hours per kilometer. That gives us a total usable range of about 350 kilometers. In the summer, it gets better, around 380, and in the winter, it gets a little bit worse at 311 kilometers. Now, regarding the battery chemistry, what's special about this car is it uses a lithium iron phosphate battery, or LFP. This comes from the CATL manufacturer in China. And one of the cool things about LFP is you can actually charge from 0 to 100% every day with little to no impact on your battery health and longevity. Unlike the traditional NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries, which are recommended to charge between 90 to 80%. That means in order to get the best out of your traditional battery that you'll find on the long-range Model Y or the performance, you're going to charge about 80%. That gives us a loss of about 100 kilometers on the dual-motor Model Y, giving us the same effective range at this car at 100%. So in terms of real-world day-to-day usability, this is pretty much got the same range as an 80% charge long-range Model Y. Sure, this car is a little bit slower and you don't have the all-wheel drive, which might be important to some people that live in the winter or want to have that versatility or towing capabilities. But for 99% of city drivers, this is a very adequate vehicle. Furthermore, there's some data supporting that LFP batteries will last a tiny bit longer, anywhere between 20 to 50% with more duty cycles. But there are two major drawbacks that I can see. One is the energy density is lower on LFP compared to traditional NMC batteries, as well as a poor cold weather performance since there's no cobalt in the battery, which does help quite a bit in cold weather environments. Now, that being said, BYD makes the Blade battery for the German-made Model Ys. Those actually charge a little bit more consistently faster than the CATL, and they're also more energy dense. So in China right now, they're the world leaders in battery technology, and there's only way to get LFPs from there. And there's some amazing revolutionary technology that's being developed at a very staggering rate. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the price of this car. Originally, we paid about $65,000 with taxes, fees, everything out the door. If you were to look at the pricing right now, which changes day to day, it's on whole about $2,000 to $3,000 cheaper to get the Model Y compared to what we bought it for. If I were to trade in this car, I would get about $45,000. And if I were to sell it in the used market, I'd be lucky to get $50,000. So on average, excluding the taxes, you're looking about $5,000 to $10,000 in depreciation, which is definitely quite a lot. I'm not used to losing that much money on cars. I come from the world of older Priuses where I typically sold them for more than I bought them for. But even those days are long and gone. Before the Teslas, I actually had a 2020 Prius Prime and I lost about $7,000 in a year. That was just the case at that time because I did buy it during the pandemic where there was a scarcity and the car market was kind of wacky at that point. But that just shows you that even the least depreciating brand, Toyota, is still going to depreciate if you buy fairly new with relatively modern tech. Furthermore, let's talk about running costs and how much electricity it actually took me to get to around 16,000 kilometers that this car has right now. Well, if you go through the Tesla app, it'll actually give you an excellent price breakdown, and it cost me about $328 in Canadian dollars, 85%, which was done mostly at level 2 charging at home, and about 15% at superchargers. The gas total for an equivalent V6 engine SUV with a similar amount of power would cost me about $2,000. That's a saving about $1,600 in gas. Not too bad. But just for comparison, I have a 2022 Tesla Model 3, which is 20% more efficient than this Model Y, and I only spent about $236 charging that car, and that car actually has higher mileage than this car, about 2,000 more kilometers annually, and I'm about $100 cheaper. That just shows you how important efficiency is in the long run. Now, in terms of the other costs, any kind of service issue was taken care of by Tesla. There's no tire replacement because this is a fairly new car, and brakes pretty much last forever on this thing since with the one pedal driving, you barely touch the brakes ever. There's even cars that have like 400,000 kilometers that are still on the original brakes. They rust faster than they wear. Now, beyond all that, let's get into the major and minor drawbacks of this car based on my experience. Now, first, let's talk about the frunk, which is the front storage compartment. Over the years, it's gone smaller and smaller because there's more tech that's housed in the front, mainly the octavalve heat pump assembly. And if you look at the original Model S that first came out, that frunk was absolutely massive. It was at least 3 times the size in terms of volume. This frunk is nice to have, and some cars, BEVs, don't even have frunk, so it's definitely nice to have that storage, but it is quite small and it's really made for a handful of groceries or storing smelly food or gym clothes. But in the old Model S and some of the other manufacturers like Rivian and even the F-150 Lightning, which is obviously a truck, those frunks are very useful. You could fit many different carry-ons and have a really usable second trunk. Furthermore, this is kind of a minor thing, but the frunk itself is not motorized. It's using some basic weak struts. There are some mods to get it to use a motor, but it would have been nice to have in the factory. And I know some people would probably use it more if it was powered. Furthermore, let's talk about the false promises of FSD. Now, FSD is a whole nother mixed bag of nuts. I actually did a full video on my experience with V12. And one of the big issues that you might encounter as we move further and further to more level 5 base autonomy is that I'm not too sure if these hardware 3 cars will have the capabilities to go full level 5 autonomy. You might need to have hardware 4 or hardware 5 to make that happen. And due to the nature and hardware limitations of this car, you might not have the ability to do full RoboCab capabilities or summon it from across town to pick you up from work. Another gripe that you're going to encounter with pretty much all EVs is the excessive tire wear. Because they're on average heavier than ICE vehicles, you are going to run through the tires quite a bit faster. Typically about 50,000 kilometers or so, depending upon your driving style. And EV specific tires are not cheap, so that's going to be a nuisance to change every now and then. Additionally, another point of concern is wear and tear over time. This car does not rattle or have any kind of creaks yet. I've been in several different Teslas that have over 100,000 kilometers, and there's always some kind of seat mount issues or some sort of creak or rattle that happens as trim pieces age and get looser over time. Sometimes I've been in Model S's that sounded like a haunted mansion. So most likely as this car ages, I'm going to experience some creaks and rattles. And because it's so quiet, it's just going to amplify that annoying sound. Now, the glass roof on this car obviously looks very nice, but I have seen many crack glass roofs, especially with high kilometer Teslas, both Model 3 and Y, and it's a very expensive fix because, especially on the Model Y, it's so large, it is going to be more or double what a windshield would cost, which is definitely going to be a potential hazard that many people are going to be facing down the road. Curb rash, which luckily I don't have in both my Model 3 and Y because we're very careful when we park these cars, but that's not the case with other Tesla drivers. It's pretty much a 99 chance percentage that you're going to see curb rash on any given Tesla on the road. Doesn't help the fact that the actual rims themselves protrude out quite a bit and there's pretty much no tire protection. You can blame it on the drivers for sure, but it would have been nice to have that kind of safety assurance, and these pretty large rims definitely don't help the case. Now, as the city gets more and more crowded with Teslas, one of the big issues that a lot of people are going to be facing is charging queues at superchargers. There's no formal charging queue system, so a lot of people argue of who comes first and things like that. So it'd be nice to have some sort of virtual queuing system that Tesla could implement quite easily through the software updates that would mitigate some of the issues that I've encountered so far in busy supercharger sites. Phantom drain is another issue where you park the car for a long period of time and it drains the battery slowly. These cars are connected 24/7 through the mothership, getting updates, and you can never really turn them off completely. They go into a deep sleep cycle, but not off. So if you were to park this car, for example, and charge it from 100% and park it for a year, it'd probably easily go down to 0% within 8 or 12 months. So parking this car long-term without charging is going to be a challenge. Furthermore, this has a lot of ADAS, driver assistant aids, and it is sometimes hit and miss when they do come on and off. I've gotten a lot of false positives where it give me early warnings when it really didn't need to, and it's also kind of let me down at times where it would have been nice to have and the system didn't activate. The problem is that there's actually Tesla insurance that relies on these ADAS systems, and if it's not 100% dependable, which it should be, it's not very reliable to have. Furthermore, in terms of rear passenger comfort, these Model Ys that we have out right now have no rear screen. So you pretty much only have vent controls and USB power, which is fine. But the new Model Y Juniper that's going to update this car will have that capability. So rear passengers can get entertainment through the display, watch YouTube, Netflix, and things like that, as well as have full HVAC controls for their heated seats, directional, and fan speeds. I have installed aftermarket rear displays, but they never work quite as good as the OEM ones from Tesla. Now, this might be a bigger concern for some than others, but that's the lack of Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. The infotainment system is next level on Teslas, but some people are still used to Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and that's not an option in Tesla and probably won't be in the foreseeable future. Now this car has two wireless charging pads that are actually designed quite well, but they only run at 7 watts, and that might not be enough power for power-hungry smartphones. And on top of that, there's no active cooling. So there's been at times where my phone has overheated and won't accept the wireless charge in the first place. So it'd be nice to have faster charging speeds for the wireless charger, as well as some sort of active cooling that other manufacturers have implemented. Now, one of the best features about this Tesla has to be the phone to key. But if you're an Android user, you might struggle at times. I switch around my phones all the time, and I did find that Android is a little bit delayed in terms of its responsiveness to opening and closing the car. In addition to that, you sometimes have to close and open the app or reactivate your Bluetooth on and off in order to make it work properly, which is, I don't find that case when I'm using an iPhone. So it's definitely optimized for the iOS platform, not so much for Android. Now, going beyond the minor gripes that I have, let's talk about the good stuff in this car. And there's too much really to list, but I'm going to just briefly go over some of my favorite features. One is how quiet this rear wheel drive is particularly. It's insulated real well with the double paned windows. And on top of that, there's no front motor whine like you have in the performance and long range Model Ys, making it possibly one of the quietest Teslas that you can get apart from maybe a Cybertruck. We mentioned some of the limitations of phone to key, but when it works, it's quite an amazing experience. Basically, you have your phone in your pocket, you walk up to the car, it automatically unlocks for you, you get in, it knows who you are because you set up a profile for your seat configuration, your steering adjustments, as well as your mirror adjustments, and it automatically adjusts that for you. Simply put your foot on the brake, go down to drive on the right stalk, and you're rocking and rolling. When you're done driving, press the button over here on the right stalk and get out of the car. It'll lock automatically. There's no fobs to worry about. There's no keys to lose. You don't have to worry about turning the car on and off. All of those little nuances have been completely optimized to distill the driving experience to the most efficient and seamless process possible. And continuing with the mobile integration, the Tesla app is pretty darn remarkable. Basically, you have full access to the car at all times with location data. You can see the battery levels. You can remotely lock and unlock it. You can control the windows, the front, the trunk, turn on the horn, lights, climate control. You can preheat in the winter, pre-cool in the summer, turn on dog mode for pets. It goes on and on and on. Another highlight is Sentry and dash cam mode. There are 8 cameras all around the car as well as 1 inside. And when you're driving, it's recording everything at all times. So in the instance where you're just driving along, minding your own business, and somebody decides to ram into you out of nowhere, you have that recording from pretty much all directions. And yes, that was me driving my Model 3. Luckily, nobody got hurt and the car wasn't written off, but I was so thankful to have the dash cam capabilities of the car. It helped me with my ICBC insurance case that I had, and that was obviously no fault of mine, and it's definitely an invaluable tool in that circumstance. I didn't have to worry about setting up a third-party dash cam, made sure it was recording at all times. It's pretty much a lifesaver feature. The other great feature is Sentry mode. When you have the car parked, it's an active security system that uses the cameras to detect if anybody gets too close to your car, and it'll record in an instant. You can also remotely view all these cameras through the app anywhere in the world. You do need premium connectivity for that, which is obviously a monthly expense, but that's not mandatory. It actually stores all these clips locally inside a thumb drive inside the glove compartment. Now, lastly, we obviously have to talk about supercharging, which is probably one of the biggest Tesla wins in the long run. Basically, you walk up to any supercharger, you plug and play. You don't have to worry about any credit cards or anything. Everything is done through the car itself. And for the most part, there's plenty of superchargers, lots of charging sites, and they're very reliable for the most part. And the big thing is it unlocks the road tripping capabilities of pretty much all Teslas, even like this one that have limited amount of range. You can go anywhere in North America or Western Europe without a hitch. And it's probably one of the most reliable networks compared to CCS, which is riddled with faulty chargers and limited amount of charging sites. Recently, I did an experiment for a couple of months of not charging at home, specifically charging at superchargers and public level 2. And it was not that big of a deal. It was an easy thing to manage. And there's lots of people living in apartments where they can't charge at home, relying on the supercharger network, and it's a fairly manageable thing. Now, in conclusion, even though this car has high depreciation costs and has some quirks that we talked about, which might be annoying for some people, I think overall, this is definitely probably one of the best family cars that I've ever experienced. It's safe, it's practical, very reliable, and easy to use. Plus, the conveniences that you get with the Tesla ecosystem is pretty much second to none. On top of that, with the software updates that get pushed out weekly, the car is only getting better and better. The question is now, would I go back to a gas car in the future? Probably not a pure ICE car, but potentially a plug-in hybrid. But I actually had a plug-in hybrid. I had a 2020 Prius Prime, and for the most part, 99% of the time I drove on the electric mode, which is actually not good for plug-in hybrids. You actually want to use the engine so the gas doesn't get bad and the piston rings and oil circulates throughout the engine. So I think for most people driving the city, they can easily go battery electric, and Tesla's is the best battery electric company out there, certainly in North America. And from a software and efficiency standpoint, I think they're probably number one in the game. But definitely love to know what you guys think of my long-term review. Have you experienced a Tesla Model 3 or why? If you are interested in battery electric vehicles, which one do you think is the best one out there? If you haven't done so, please subscribe and make sure you have post notifications turned on and like the video if you haven't done so already. I really want to do another review of my 2022 Model 3 that I've had for almost 2 years now. And it's going to be kind of interesting to kind of compare my experience with the Model Y to the Model 3, only if you guys are interested, of course. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you real soon in the next one. Take care.